My name is Marin. I'm 38 years old. And the bridge my mother walked across to celebrate her 70th birthday, the one with the brass plaque and the mayor and the small string quartet, I designed it. My name is on the public filings. My signature is on the load calculations. The whole town of Ashford, Ohio came out to clap. My mother gave a speech about community. She did not say my name. She did not know to say my name. Because in 26 years, she had never once asked what I did for a living, only how much I made. And what I did the next morning, they didn't expect it. I'm Marin, and this is Confession Chronicles, where the people who underestimate you always learn, far too late, exactly who they were dealing with. If you've ever stood quietly while someone took credit for the air in the room, stay with me. This one is for you. I drew bridges before I knew the word for them. My father used to bring home graph paper from his office, and I would cover it in these careful little arches, all of them connecting one side of nothing to the other side of nothing. I was 6. I didn't know I was doing engineering. I thought I was drawing pretty roads. By the time I was 11, I'd built a model bridge for a school competition out of balsa wood and white glue, and it held 48 pounds before it cracked. My teacher framed the photograph. My mother framed the blueprint. She hung it in the hallway between the bathroom and the linen closet. For 27 years it lived there. I thought it meant she loved me. I'll come back to that. The thing about being a structural engineer is, a measurement doesn't care how you feel about it. Steel has a yield strength. Concrete has a compression limit. If you ask a beam to carry more than it was rated for, it doesn't get sentimental. It bends. Then it fails. There is a quiet, almost embarrassing dignity in a structure that simply refuses to carry what it cannot. People are not like that. People will carry whatever you hand them, even when their hands are shaking, even when their knees give. People will pretend the load is fine. I know this because I was one of those people for 36 years. This story is about the year I finally became a structure. The year I learned what to refuse. Let me tell you about my mother before I tell you about what she did. When I was 9, I fell off my bike on the corner of Hickory and Vine, and I split my chin open on the concrete. There was blood on the front of my shirt, and the chain of the bike was tangled around my ankle, and I was screaming the way children scream, when they don't yet know that injuries end. My mother was 3 blocks away hanging laundry. She heard me. I don't know how. I've replayed that day in my head 100 times, and I still don't understand how she heard me from 3 blocks away, through a screen door and a wet bed sheet flapping in the wind. But she did. And she ran, and when she got to me, the car was at the shop, and the urgent care was 6 blocks the other direction, so she picked me up, all 70 pounds of me, and she carried me, the whole way, 6 blocks, in July, and she sang to me, a song she made up as she walked. Something about a little frog who lived in a pocket. I don't remember the words. I remember the feeling of her chest rising and falling, and the way her voice went a little ragged toward the end, because she was out of breath. But she was not stopped singing. By the time we got to the urgent care, I had stopped crying. The nurse said later it was one of the cleanest panicked walk-ins she'd ever seen. That was my mother. That was Lorraine. I need you to know that woman existed. Because if I don't tell you about her, you'll think this is a story about a monster. And it isn't. It's a story about a woman who used to carry me. And then, somewhere between Hickory and Vine and the dining room of a Holiday Inn ballroom in 2023, she put me down, and she forgot where she'd left me. And when I came back to remind her, she pretended she'd never picked me up at all. My father is Clifford. He retired from the post office. He has 6 sentences he uses for most situations, and the 7th, the one he saves for the hard moments, is "Your mother knows best." He has said that sentence in my presence approximately 400 times. I counted once on a long drive, just for something to do. My younger sister is Laurel. Laurel is the kind of person who never says when she could say we were thinking, we feel. We've decided the we is always Laurel and my mother. I am rarely included in the we. I figured that out around the time I was 17. And then there's my grandmother Ruth, my mother's mother. Ruth is 84. She is the most economical speaker I have ever known. She will say 4 words to settle an argument that has been raging for an hour. When I was a teenager, she watched me dismantle my self-respect on the kitchen floor trying to apologize for something I hadn't done, and she said, without looking up from her crossword, "Stop. He knows." And then she went back to her puzzle. That was Ruth. That is still Ruth. My aunt is Norma. Norma loves everyone. Norma is sure no one ever meant anything bad. Norma is the human equivalent of a soft blanket thrown over a fire alarm. Those are the people in this story. Hold them in your mind. They will move. I just wanted to be useful. That's the truest thing I can say about my 20s and most of my 30s. I just wanted to be useful. I co-signed my mother's car loan when I was 22. It took me 3 years to clear it off my credit report after the dealership flagged it for missed payments she never told me about. I wired her $4,000 when I was 28 for what she called a plumbing's emergency. And what I found out 2 Thanksgivings later was actually a deposit on Laurel's tuition. I paid for the dining room set in 2019 because she said the old one was embarrassing her in front of the new pastor. I covered the property taxes the year my father retired. I wrote checks I never told my husband about because I knew the look he would give me, the one that meant Marin again, and every time I wrote one, my mother would say the same sentence. We're so proud of you. She said it when I graduated from Ohio State. She said it when I passed my professional engineer exam. She said it the day I made senior engineer. And she said it the day I made principal. We're so proud of you. We're so proud of you. We're so proud of you. I want you to remember that sentence. I'm going to come back to it. There were signs. There were always signs. The Christmas in 2017 when she introduced my husband, Daniel, as Marin's friend, to a couple she'd just met at church, who later told me they assumed I was the unmarried one. I let it go. Maybe I was overthinking it. The Easter in 2019, when she set the table and forgot my place setting, and then laughed and said, "Well, you weren't sure you were coming." I had texted her 2 weeks before to confirm. I let it go. Maybe I was overthinking it. The birthday in 2021 where she got Laurel a trip to Charleston and got me a candle that smelled faintly of pine. I lit it once. I let it go. Maybe I was overthinking it. Every time I let something go, I thought I was being graceful. I thought grace was the thing I was good at. Turns out I wasn't being graceful. I was being trained. What my family didn't know, what they never bothered to ask about, was that I had spent 15 years building a career so quietly that none of them noticed I had one. My mother knew I worked with buildings. My father, when pressed, would say, "Marin does math." My sister, the one time someone at a wedding asked her what I did, told them I was in construction, which, technically, is the same way you could describe a man who pours sidewalks. I let it go. I let everything go. I was so good at letting things go, I forgot where I'd put myself. I was the principal engineer of record on the Ashford Heritage Bridge. I'd been on that project for 6 years. 6 years of soil samples and load calculations and arguments with the county about cantilever clearance. 6 years of late nights at the drafting table, while Daniel brought me tea I didn't drink until it was cold. My name was on the filings. My signature was on the master plan. The plaque, when it was finally cast, would carry my firm's name and underneath, in smaller letters, mine. Principal Engineer of Record, Marin Holloway, P.E. My mother did not know this. She did not know it because she had never asked. I told myself, for years, that this was fine. I told myself that family doesn't require resumes. I told myself a lot of things. The thing about telling yourself things is, at some point, you have to stop talking and listen to what your body is doing. And my body, by the spring of 2023, was not sleeping. My body was waking up at 4:17 in the morning every single day. My body was holding its breath through phone calls. My body knew something my mouth had refused to admit. A measurement doesn't care how you feel about it. Saturday, April 22nd, 1:45 in the afternoon. Lorraine's 70th birthday was 3 months away, and she had called a family meeting at the kitchen table on Ridgeline Drive, the house I grew up in. The house I'd helped them keep for the last decade by writing checks I never mentioned. I was wearing the gray sweater Daniel had given me for our 5th anniversary. It was too warm for April, but I'd put it on because I needed something soft against my skin. The kitchen smelled the way it always smelled. Lemon cleaner and burnt coffee. My mother bleached that counter every morning whether it needed it or not. I used to think it was love of a clean home. I think now it was something else. I think she was rehearsing. My father was at the head of the table. Laurel was to his right. My mother was standing. She always stood at family meetings, like a teacher at a chalkboard. And Norma was there, too, in the corner chair by the phone, which was strange. Norma did not usually come to family meetings, my mother said. We've been thinking about my birthday. There was that we again. We want to do it at the bridge. I didn't understand at first. I thought she meant a bridge. I thought maybe she'd been to a park, seen a footbridge, fallen in love with the idea of something quaint. I said, "Which bridge, Mom?" And she said it the way she said everything that mattered. Lightly. Like it was a gift she was already wrapping. The new one. The Ashford Heritage. The one they're cutting the ribbon for in July. The whole town will be there. We thought, wouldn't it be perfect? My 70th, with the whole community. Norma's already started the calls. I want to tell you what I felt. I'm gonna try. The first thing I felt was nothing. A flat, clean nothing. The kind of nothing that happens when a load arrives that you weren't rated for. The second thing I felt was the gray sweater against my collarbone, suddenly itchy. The third thing I felt, and this is the one that mattered, was the slow, full understanding that my mother was about to host her birthday at my bridge. And she did not know it was my bridge. And she had not asked, even casually, who I might know who could help her get permission. She had called the mayor's office. She had called the county. She had called the Chamber of Commerce. She had called Norma, and Norma had called the florist. She had not called me. I said, "Mom, who told you that you could have it there?" She laughed, not unkindly. She laughed the way she'd laughed in 2019 when she forgot my place setting. "Oh, honey, don't be like that. The mayor's wife and I are in the same Bible study. It's all set. We just need you to come early to help set up the tables." Laurel was looking at her phone. My father was looking at his coffee. Norma was looking at her hands. Every part of me wanted to stand up and walk over to the framed blueprint in the hallway and pull it off the wall and put it on the kitchen table and say, "Do you know what this is? Do you know what I do? Do you know whose name is on the plaque you're about to drink champagne under?" I didn't. I sat there. I let my mother finish her speech about how lovely it would be, how the photos would be just gorgeous with the river in the background, how she'd already picked out a navy dress. When she was done, I said, "I'll think about it." She said, "What's there to think about?" I said it again, "I'll think about it." And for the first time in my life, restraint felt like power. Not the kind you announce, the kind you bank. I drove home with my hands at 10 and 2, and my jaw locked so tight, my back teeth ached for 3 days. Daniel was in the kitchen. He took one look at me and didn't ask. He put the kettle on. He waited. That's the thing about Daniel. He waits, I told him. All of it. The meeting, the kitchen, the navy dress, the mayor's wife, the way Norma's hands had been twisting in her lap the whole time. And Daniel, who has loved me carefully and quietly for 9 years, Daniel said one sentence. He said, "Marin, they don't know it's yours." And I said, "I know. That's the worst part." He said, "Is it?" And I sat with that question for a long time. Here's what I tried first. Because before the silence, there was always the explaining. There was always one more attempt. I called my mother that Sunday. I said, "Mom, I need to tell you something about that bridge." She said, "Honey, if this is about parking, Norma already has it sorted." I said, "It's not about parking." "Mom, she said, "Hold on, the dog's at the door." There was no dog. There has never been a dog. The phone went down on what I assume was the counter. And I listened to my mother have a conversation with my father about whether the trash had gone out. And after 4 minutes, she came back and said, "I'm sorry, sweetie, what were you saying?" I said, "I designed the bridge." There was a pause. I want to tell you, it was a meaningful pause. It wasn't. It was the pause of a woman trying to find something more interesting to say than what her daughter had just said. She said, "Oh, that's nice. So you'll know where the outlets are for the speaker system." I hung up. I sat at my kitchen island. I looked at the calendar on the fridge. 3 months until the ribbon cutting. 3 months and 5 months until my mother stood on my bridge and gave a speech about community. I tried again the next week. I drove to Ridgeline Drive on a Tuesday evening with the blueprint in a tube under my arm. The original, the one I'd drawn at 11, the one she'd kept framed in the hallway. I wanted to show her the through line. I wanted to say this was me, and this is me, and the whole time it was me. I rang the bell. She opened the door. She said, "Oh, did we have something today?" I said, "No, Mom. I wanted to talk to you about my work." She said, "Oh, honey, Norma's coming over in 20 minutes. We're going to look at table linens. Can it wait?" I said, "Yes, it can wait. It always could wait. Everything about me could wait." I called my sister. I called Laurel. I said, "Did Mom say anything to you about the bridge?" She said, "We're so excited." I said, "Laurel, listen. The bridge, I'm the engineer on it. I designed it. She said, "We know you work with buildings as Marin." I said, "It's my project, it's my name on the plans." She said, "Okay. So can you make sure the parking situation is handled?" Mom's been stressed about parking. I hung up. I sat on the floor of my office for an hour. Daniel came home and found me there and didn't say anything, just sat down next to me on the carpet, his back against the wall, and held my hand. After a while, he said, "What you want to do?" And I said, "I don't know. I keep trying to make them see me." He said, "What if they can't?" He said it gently. He said it like a structural engineer says it when she's looking at a beam that's been failing for years. He said it like a diagnosis. I went to see Ruth that weekend, my grandmother, the one who says 4 words and ends conversations. She was at her dining room table doing a crossword. She was wearing a sweater the color of oatmeal. She did not look up when I came in. She said, "Tea's on." I poured myself a cup. I sat down across from her. I told her everything: the bridge, the party, the phone calls, the blueprint in the hallway. "We're so proud of you." I talked for 45 minutes, and Ruth did not interrupt me once. She filled in 2/3 of her crossword. When I was done, she put her pencil down. She looked at me. She said, "Marin, honey, your mother has been telling people you do drywall." I said, "What?" She said, "Drywall." "For about 10 years. I've heard her at church. She says her older daughter does drywall." The kitchen was very quiet. Ruth picked up her pencil. She said, "4-letter word for to refuse to acknowledge. Starts with a D." I said, "Denny." She said, "Yes, that's it. I want to tell you what that did to me. I'm going to try. You know how when a bridge starts to fail, it doesn't all go at once. There's a long period where it looks fine. The cars still drive across it. The pedestrians don't notice. But underneath, in the bracing, there's a hairline crack that's been there for years, and every load adds to it. And one day, a truck the same weight as 10,000 other trucks before it drives across, and the crack reaches its limit, and the whole span just gives. Drywall. She had told them I did drywall. My mother had stood in the same building where she'd baptized me, and she had told her friends for 10 years that I did drywall. And then she had asked me to come to her birthday party at the bridge I had designed, and to handle the parking. I drove home from Ruth's house at 30 miles an hour. I do not remember most of the drive. I remember the sun going down over a field of new corn, and I remember pulling into my own driveway and sitting in the car for a long time. I remember Daniel coming out and looking through the windshield at me and going back inside without saying anything and turning on the porch light. I remember thinking, drywall. I want to tell you about Easter. Easter that year was 3 weeks after the kitchen meeting. I went. Of course I went. I had not yet stopped explaining myself. I drove to Ridgeline Drive with a casserole and a card, and the same gray sweater because I had not yet figured out that I was allowed to wear something else. Ruth was there. Ruth was always at Easter. She sat at the end of the table near the window, and halfway through the meal, between the ham and the dessert, I noticed something. Ruth's left hand was bare. Ruth had worn a thin gold band on her left ring finger since before I was born. Her wedding ring. My grandfather had been dead for 19 years, and she had never taken it off. Not at the lake, not in the garden, not when she did dishes. Never. It was gone. I said, "Grandma, your ring." She looked down at her hand. She said, "Oh." My mother, from the kitchen, called out, "Mom gave it to Laurel for her engagement. Isn't that sweet?" Laurel was glowing. Laurel was holding up her hand. The thin gold band was on her finger. She said, "We're so honored." Ruth looked at me across the table. She did not say anything. She did not have to. I have replayed that look in my head 1,000 times since, and I still cannot tell you exactly what was in it. There was sadness, but it was not the loud kind. There was anger, but it had been worn smooth by time. There was a question, and the question was, "Do you see this? Are you finally seeing this?" I called Ruth 2 days later. I said, "Grandma, the ring. Did you give it to Laurel?" There was a long pause, and Ruth said, "Your mother asked to borrow it. For the photographs. She said she'd give it back." I said, "When?" Ruth said, "Last August. It was April." I said, "Grandma, do you want it back?" She said, "I want a lot of things, Marin. I'm 84. I've learned to want quietly." I want you to sit with that sentence. I've learned to want quietly. My grandmother had been wanting her own wedding ring quietly for 9 months while her granddaughter wore it, and her daughter took credit for the gift. I asked Ruth if I could do anything. She said, "No, honey, I just wanted someone to know." That night, I drafted an email to my mother. 4 pages. With a diagram. I am not joking. I drew a diagram. I drew a load path diagram, the kind I draw at work, the kind you use to show how stress travels through a structure. I labeled the nodes. I labeled the loads. I labeled myself at the bottom as the foundation. I labeled the ring as a tensile element. I labeled Ruth as a fixed support. I almost sent it. At 2:14 a.m., I almost sent it. I had my finger on the send button. I'd rewritten the opening paragraph 6 times. I had added a postscript about how I wasn't trying to be dramatic. I just wanted to be heard. I just want to be, and I stopped. I reread the email. I looked at my own words. And I saw, with a clarity that arrived where certain truths do, not loud, not sudden, just there. I saw a woman begging a woman who had not read past the first paragraph of anything she'd ever written. I did not send the email. I did not save it either. I selected all the text and I deleted it. I closed the laptop. I went into the bedroom. Daniel was awake. He had been awake for a while. He said, "Did you send it?" "No." He said, "Good." I said, "Why good?" He said, "Because the woman I married doesn't beg." I cried then. I cried the way you cry when someone tells you the truth about yourself that you have been refusing to tell yourself. I cried for the woman who had spent 26 years drafting emails to people who would not read them. I cried for the 11-year-old who had drawn a bridge for a school project and trusted her mother to know what it meant. I cried for Ruth, who had learned to want quietly. I cried mostly for the gray sweater, which I had been wearing in every difficult conversation of my recent life, as if soft fabric could armor me against people who did not love me back. In the morning, I took the sweater off. I folded it. I put it in a bag. I drove to a donation bin behind the Methodist Church on 9th Street, and I dropped it in. I drove home. I did not cry again. I wasn't angry yet. Anger would come later, in waves in the middle of meetings I could barely focus on. Right then I felt something simpler. Clarity. The kind that doesn't arrive with a sound. It arrives like a door that has been stuck for years finally clicking open. Daniel asked me, that next Saturday, what I wanted to do. I had been quiet for a week. He let me be quiet. He is good at that. I said, "I'm not going to the birthday party." He said, "Okay." I said, "I'm not going to explain why." He said, "Okay." I said, "I'm not going to send a letter or a text or an email. I'm not going to call ahead. I'm just not going to be there." He said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yes, I'm the engineer of record. I'll be at the dedication, officially, with the firm, with the mayor, with the county. I will be on the program. I will be there as Marin Holloway, PE. And my mother will see me for the first time in her life, in the only context I have ever wanted her to see me in, and she will have built her entire birthday around that moment. And she will have to live with what that means." D'Angelo was quiet for a while. Then he said, "Marin, that's not revenge." I said, "I know." He said, "What is it?" I said, "It's a measurement." I did not tell my mother. I did not tell my sister. I did not tell my father. I did not tell Norma. I told Ruth. Ruth said, "Good. I'd like a ride to the ceremony." I said, "Grandma, they might not understand." Ruth said, "Marin, they have not understood for a long time." I scheduled it carefully. The dedication was at 11 a.m. on July 15th. My mother's party, her party, was scheduled to begin at 2 p.m. At the same location. My firm had been given the morning slot for the official ribbon cutting with the mayor, the county commissioner, the news station from Columbus, the head of the Historical Society. My mother had been given the afternoon slot for her guests because she had asked, and because the mayor's wife was in her Bible study, and because no one had told her that the morning slot belonged to the engineer. She did not know there was a morning slot. I told my firm. I told my colleagues. I told the marketing team that I would be giving the 4-minute remarks at the dedication. I had been planning those remarks for 6 years. I had rewritten them 11 times. They were short, they were technical, they were honest, they were mine. I called my mother 3 weeks before the ceremony. I said, "Mom, I won't be able to come to the party." She said, "What?" I said, "I won't be able to come." She said, "Marin, it's my 70th. I said, "I know." She said, "You don't get another 70th. You only get one." I said, "I know." She said, "What could possibly be more important?" I did not answer. I let the silence sit in her ear the way her silences had sat in mine for 26 years. After a long time, she said, "Is this about the dining room set?" I said, "No, Mom. It's not about the dining room set." She said, "Then what is it about?" And here is where I made my one mistake. I should have said nothing. I should have hung up. I should have let the silence finish what it had started. But I am Marin, and I am a woman who over-explains, and I had not yet finished growing out of myself. So I said one sentence. One small, honest sentence. I said, I'll be at the dedication in the morning with my firm. Goodbye, Mom. And I hung up before she could ask what I meant. The phone calls started that night. The first one was at 9:42 p.m. It was Lorraine. Her voice was warm. She said, Honey, I think we got our wires crossed. Norma says the dedication is at 11. Are you saying you'll come to that and then to the party? Because that would be wonderful. I said, No, Mom. I'll be at the dedication. I won't be at the party, she said, but they're at the same place. I said, I know. She said, Marin, that doesn't make any sense. I said, I know. She said, You'll be at the bridge, but you won't come to my party at the bridge. I said, Yes. There was a long silence. She said, Are you punching me for something? I said, No, Mom. I'm working. She said, Working? At a bridge ceremony? I said, Yes. She said, Marin, what kind of work? And here it was. The question she had refused to ask for 15 years. The question that should have been a conversation at a kitchen table over a long Saturday morning. The question that should have been an opening of her arms and a wanting to know. Instead, it arrived at 9:42 p.m. on a Tuesday as an accusation because something I had said did not fit into the story she was telling about her birthday. I said, I'm a structural engineer, Mom. I designed the bridge. She laughed. She actually laughed. She said, Marin, honey, don't be silly. I said, Good night, Mom. I hung up. Daniel was sitting on the couch. He was pretending to read. He had been pretending to read for 40 minutes. I sat down next to him. He put his hand on my knee. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The phone rang again at 10:15. It was Laurel. Laurel said, Marin, what is going on? Mom is crying. I said, Laurel, I'm going to bed. She said, we are all very confused. Are you telling people you built the bridge? I said, Good night, Laurel. She said, Marin, this is unhinged. I said, Good night, Laurel. I hung up. The phone rang again. I turned it off. I went to bed. I slept for 9 hours. For the first time in 8 months, I slept for 9 hours. The next morning, there were 41 messages from my mother, from my sister, from Norma, from my father, who had not called me on his own initiative in 11 years, from the wife of one of my father's golf friends, whom I had not spoken to since 2014, from the church secretary, from the woman who cuts my mother's hair. I read 3 of them. I deleted the rest. The first one I read was from Norma. It said, Marin, honey, I'm sure your mother didn't mean to upset you. She just doesn't know what she said. Whatever it was. Can you call her? The second was from Laurel. It said, If you don't come to the party, you are dead to this family. The third was from my father. It said, Your mother knows best. I made coffee. I made it the way I like it. Not the way my mother makes it, not the way Daniel makes it, the way I like it. Strong and black and bitter. I drank it standing at the window, looking at the maple tree in the front yard, the one Daniel planted the year we moved in. The phone rang again. I didn't answer. It rang again. I didn't answer. It rang for 3 days. On the 4th day, Ruth called. I picked up. Ruth said, Marin, your mother is at my house. She has been here for 2 hours. She wants to know if you have actually lost your mind. I said, Grandma, what do you want me to do? Ruth said, Nothing. I'm telling you because I want you to know what's happening. Your mother is here. She is on the couch. She has been crying for an hour about how you've abandoned her. I have made her 3 cups of tea. She has not drunk any of them. I said, I'm sorry, Grandma, Ruth said. Don't be sorry. I don't want to tell her something. Do you want me to tell her something? It is my call, but I want you to know first. I said, Grandma, you don't owe me anything. Ruth said, Marin, pay attention. I do not owe you anything, but I am 84. And I am going to do this now, because I will not be here forever, and I have wanted quietly for long enough. I said, Okay. I heard her put the phone down. I heard the small clatter of the receiver on the wood of her counter. I heard her footsteps. They were soft. They were the footsteps of a woman who had not raised her voice in 50 years. I heard her say very clearly, very evenly, to my mother in the next room, Lorraine, sit down. I am going to tell you something, and I am going to say it once. There was a pause. Marin is the engineer of the bridge. She has been on the project for 6 years. Her name is on the master plan. Her signature is on the structural drawings. The town is having her dedication ceremony in the morning. Your party in the afternoon will be held on a bridge that your daughter designed and that you have told the church she had nothing to do with, because you told them she did drywall. I have heard you. I have heard you for 10 years. I did not say anything because it was not my business. It is my business now because you are about to embarrass yourself in public. I am telling you so that you have time to take it in before tomorrow. That is the only reason I am telling you. Not to give you a chance to apologize to her. She is past that. To give you a chance to not stand in front of the mayor's wife with your mouth open. I heard my mother make a sound. It was not a word, it was a sound. I have not been able to describe it since. The closest I can come is, it was the sound of a load arriving that she had not been rated for. I heard Ruth pick up the phone again. She said, Marin, I'm going to go. Your mother needs to leave my house now. I said, Grandma. She said, I said, did you mean that? About the ring, about wanting it back? Ruth said, yes. I said, okay. She said, good night, Marin. I said, good night, Grandma. She hung up. I sat on the kitchen floor. Daniel came in. He sat down next to me. He did not say anything. I did not say anything. We sat there until the light went gray. The morning of July 15th was clear and bright, the kind of summer morning where the air feels like it has been polished. The river was high. The light came off it the way it does in late summer, white and a little hard. I wore a navy dress, not the one my mother had bought for her party, a different one. I had bought it the week before. It had pockets. I put my hands in the pockets and I felt the seams and I felt my own breathing. And I felt for the first time like a woman who was about to stand in front of a community and say the truth. The ribbon cutting was at 11. The mayor spoke first. He was kind. He read from a card. He said the bridge was a triumph of community engineering, that it had taken 6 years, that it would last 100. He thanked the county. He thanked the historical society. He thanked the firm. And then he said, I'd like to introduce the principal engineer of record, the woman whose vision and hand have been on this project since day one, Marin Holloway. There was applause. It was real applause, the kind that knows what it is clapping for. Walked to the lectern. I looked out at the crowd. My mother was there. She had come. She was standing toward the back in her navy dress. Her navy dress, the one she had picked out months ago for the party. She was not crying. She was very, very still. Norma was next to her. Norma's hands were folded in front of her, knuckle over knuckle. My father was in the back. He was looking at his shoes. Laurel was not there. Ruth was in the front row. Ruth had ridden over with me. Ruth had not said anything in the car for the entire drive, and when we got there she had said, "Park close, Marin. My knees." And then she had walked very slowly to her seat. She had been the first person sitting. I looked at Ruth. Ruth nodded almost imperceptibly. The kind of nod you would miss if you weren't her granddaughter. I gave my 4-minute remarks. I had rewritten them 11 times. I will not give them to you here, because they were technical and because they were mine, and because some things belong to the person who wrote them. But I will tell you the last sentence. I had not planned to say the last sentence. I had not written it. It came up out of me the way certain truths do. I said, a bridge holds weight because of what it refuses to carry. I learned that from steel before I learned it from people. Thank you. The applause was loud. It went on for a while. I stepped back from the lectern. The mayor shook my hand. Someone took a photograph. I looked at my mother. She looked at me. We looked at each other for a long time. She did not come up to me. I did not go up to her. There was a distance between us that no one in the crowd could see, and that both of us could feel, and that, I understood then, had been there for a very long time. We had just finally stopped pretending it wasn't. She left before they cut the ribbon, she and Norma. They walked back to the parking lot. My father stayed for the ribbon cutting, and then he came up to me awkwardly, and he said one sentence. He said, I didn't know. I said, I know, Dad. He said, I should have. I said, yes, you should have. He nodded. He walked away. The party that afternoon happened. I did not go. I was told later, by Norma, in a long voicemail I listened to once, that fewer than half the invited guests showed up because the mayor's wife had whispered something to her sister, and her sister had whispered something to the church secretary, and by 1 p.m., the entire grapevine of Ashford, Ohio knew that Lorraine Holloway's birthday was being held in the bridge that her own daughter had designed, and that she had been telling everyone, for 10 years, did drywall. The Sunday after the ceremony, my mother did not go to church. She did not go the Sunday after that either. By August, she had stopped going. She has not been back, not because she is angry, because she cannot bear to walk in there and be looked at by people who now know what she did. The bridge is the consequence. The pews she can no longer sit in are the actual cost. 3 weeks after the ceremony, I got an email from Norma. It was short. I read it 5 times. I am going to read it to you exactly as she wrote it. She wrote, Marin, I was a coward for a long time. I knew what she was telling people. I knew what she was doing with the ring. I knew about the dining room money. I was a coward. I'm sorry. I don't know what to do with this. I just wanted you to know I knew. Love, Norma. I read it 5 times. I did not write back right away. I wrote back 2 months later. I wrote one sentence. I wrote, thank you, Norma. That mattered. I have not heard from her since. I think that's okay. I think some apologies are not the beginning of something. I think some apologies are the ending of something, said Aunt honestly, by the person who needed to say it for their own soul. I think Norma's email was that, and I hope, she is sleeping better. Ruth got her ring back. Laurel sent it. There was no note. There did not need to be one. Ruth put it on her finger. She has not taken it off since. I asked her at Christmas how it felt to wear it again. She said, like a missing tooth that finally came back. And then she went back to her crossword. My father calls me on the second Sunday of every month. He has done this for 6 months. He does not have much to say. He talks about the weather. He talks about the new tomato variety he is growing. He talks about a documentary he watched. He does not talk about my mother. I do not ask. It is not nothing. It is not everything. It is one small Sunday phone call from a man who is trying, in the only way he knows, to undo 11 years of saying, your mother knows best. Laurel and I do not speak. I do not think we will for a long time. I am at peace with that. Some bridges you do not rebuild. Some bridges you let stand as they are, broken but quiet, and you build your life somewhere else, somewhere across a different river entirely. My mother came to my house once, in November, alone. She rang the doorbell at 4 p.m. on a Wednesday. She was smaller than I remembered. Her hair was different. She had not warned me she was coming. I opened the door. I did not say anything. She said, Marin, I am not here to be forgiven. I am here because I need to say something to your face. I told people you did drywall because I was afraid that if I said what you actually did, they would ask me about it and I would not know the answers. And they would know I did not know my own daughter. So I made you small. I made you small as it was easier than admitting how far away from you I had let myself drift. I am sorry. I am not asking you to do anything with that. I just needed you to hear it once, from me, in person. I looked at her for a long time. I said, thank you for saying that. She said, can I come in? I said, not today, Mom. She nodded. She said, okay. She turned and walked back to her car. I watched her go. I closed the door. I left it open 1 inch, not wide enough to walk through, not locked. I think that is where we are, for now. I want to tell you what I learned. I am going to try. I used to think love was the willingness to carry. I thought a good daughter was a strong load-bearing element. I thought my job was to take whatever weight my family handed me and hold it without complaining, and that if I held it long enough and quietly enough, they would notice me. They would see me. They would say my name out loud in the rooms where it mattered. I was wrong about all of it. A bridge holds weight because of what it refuses to carry. That is the actual truth. A bridge has a yield strength, it has a load rating, it has a number posted on a sign at the entrance that tells the world this much and no more. If you put more than that on a bridge, the bridge will not become a better bridge. It will become a fallen bridge. It will collapse, and the people who were depending on it to get across will be in the water. I had no load rating. I had no posted sign. I let my family drive across me for 36 years with no idea what I could carry, because I had never told them, because I had been taught by a woman who once sang me through a 6-block walk with a split chin that good daughters do not post signs. Good daughters carry. I think she was wrong. I think she knew she was wrong. I think somewhere between Hickory and Vine in that kitchen on Ridgeline Drive, she made a decision to keep carrying me by refusing to see what I was carrying. And the longer she did it, the harder it became to look. And so she invented a daughter who did drywall, because a daughter who did drywall could not, by her existence, ask anything of her. I am not a daughter who did drywall. I built a bridge. I built it slowly over 15 years while no one was watching. And I built another bridge, a smaller one inside myself between the woman I was and the woman I wanted to become, and I forgot to put railings on it. I almost fell off. In the middle of an email I drafted at 2:14 in the morning, I almost begged. I almost folded back into the woman my mother could see, because being seen wrongly felt safer for a long time than not being seen at all. If you are watching this, and you recognize this, you are not crazy. You are not too sensitive. You saw exactly what you thought you saw. the smile that was warmer for the cousin, the place setting that wasn't there, the friend your husband was introduced as, the candle for your birthday that smelled faintly of pine. You have been writing your own load calculations in your head for years. You know what you can carry. You know what you cannot. You have been waiting for permission to post the sign. This is the permission. From a stranger on the internet who has been exactly where you are. Post the sign. I have spent the last year not explaining myself. Not to my mother, not to my sister, not to the relatives who heard one side of the story and decided I was the villain. I have not corrected the record. I have not produced evidence. I have not made my case. I used to make my case. I used to make my case in 4-page emails with diagrams. I do not do that anymore. A bridge does not explain itself. A bridge stands. And the people who can read its design read it. And the people who cannot drive across it without noticing, and they go on with their day, and that is fine. That was always going to be fine. I was the one who thought the bridge needed to convince them. I am standing in my driveway right now. I came outside to take this in. The phone is in my pocket. It has been quiet for 6 hours. There was a time, not long ago, when 6 quiet hours from my mother would have sent me into a spiral. I would have called her. I would have apologized for something I had not done. I would have folded back into the daughter she could see. I do not do that anymore. The phone is quiet, and the maple Daniel planted is taller than the porch now, and the wind is moving through me instead of around me. I set 4 plates for dinner last week. There used to be a habit in my family of setting 5. 1 for the absent. I do not do that anymore. 4 plates. For the people who are here. For Daniel. For Ruth, who comes over on Sundays now. For our friend Hugo, who drops by uninvited and always brings bread. For me. It felt right. It felt like the right number. The blueprint that hung in the hallway between the bathroom and the linen closet for 27 years, I went and got it. The week after the ceremony, my mother was not home. My father let me in. I took it off the wall. He did not say anything. He just watched me. I rolled it up. I took it home. It hangs now in my office, above my drafting table. The childhood me drew it. The grown me looks up at it sometimes when I am working late. We are the same person. We are not the person my mother thought we were. I hope, the 11-year-old who drew it would be okay with how it has all turned out. If you are the one who always carries the weight at a family table that was never built to hold you, maybe it's time to build your own table and to sit at the head of it and to invite only the people who know the load rating and who would never ask you to exceed it. I do not know if I made the right call. I think I did. I think I might have. I think on the harder days, I still wonder. I think that is part of the deal. I think you do not get to make a hard call and also get to be certain about it. You make the call, you live with the doubt, you measure and you remeasure and you keep going. Have you ever stopped explaining yourself to people who weren't listening and watched them get louder before they got quieter? Tell me what that silence sounded like down in the comments. I read them. I read all of them. I am still learning what silence is for. I am Marin. This was my story. Thank you for staying with me to the end of it. A bridge holds weight because of what it refuses to carry. I learned that from steel before I learned it from people. Now you know it too.